Hello guys, welcome to Plant Powered Fitness Munich. Alan here, and today what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about spirituality, which is something that I haven't really touched on a great deal on the channel. And it's a very, very important facet of what our health and fitness is all about. You know, when people talk about health and fitness and lifestyle coaching and so forth, the thing that mainly comes to mind is doing workouts, eating the right food, etc., which is obviously very, very important. But there is more to personal development and lifestyle coaching than just that. The spiritual aspect is very, very important. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today and name two mentors that I use that I find very useful for that spiritual development, if you like. You know, one of the things that I've noticed in the fitness industry, having worked in the fitness industry for quite some time, is that, you know, it's a very, very body orientated line of work, because obviously people are focusing on their physiques. Personal trainers are obsessed with their physiques normally, especially when they're in their 20s and 30s. I'm not saying everybody, but generally speaking, it's a very selfish, self-obsessed kind of an environment to work in. You know, I remember when I was working in gyms and hanging out with personal trainers a lot, you know, you'd greet each other in the morning and then it would be kind of like tricep inspection time, you know, and people would be flexing, and the ego's quite rampant in the personal training world, there's no doubt about that. But what I've found over the years is that quite often people who are very bodily obsessed like that when they're younger tend to start to get into more of the spiritual stuff as they start to develop. They realise very, very quickly that just being focused on the physical and the ego in the long run is very, very shallow in terms of having a meaningful life, and they tend to steer off towards spirituality as they go. I mean, I can give a classic example of that. Dorian Yates, the bodybuilder, who was Mr. Olympia, I believe it was between 94 and 97. He won the Mr. Olympia 3 times. And he's one of my kind of virtual mentors as well. He's a fascinating character. But as he readily admits, you know, when he was at the peak of his bodybuilding career, he was completely obsessed with his physique. Everything was very, very selfish. Everything revolved around what he was eating and the training he was doing and being in prime condition to go on stage. And especially so in his case, because it was his profession, that's how he made his living, and he did it very, very successfully. But since giving up bodybuilding, Dorian Yates has developed into one of the most interesting spiritual characters you could imagine. He's a man of infinite wisdom, incredibly interesting to listen to, and he's become almost the complete antithesis of that kind of ego-driven, body-orientated kind of a person, if you like. So, you know, if you get the chance to go onto YouTube or watch documentaries or whatever of Dorian Yates talking about his career and talking about how he's developed since he gave up bodybuilding, you know, it's a really, really interesting listen. Paul Cech as well, who is Paul Cech is an absolute expert in kinesiology. And I did my part of my personal training education through the Cech Institute, which he runs. Also somebody who was very body orientated during his younger years, but as his career has developed, again, has moved more and more towards the spiritual path. And I've seen this time and time again with people in that environment. The people who don't tend to develop themselves on the spiritual level can often become very, very shallow individuals when they get into their later years. As they get into their 40s, 50s and 60s, they can become quite sad in terms of their outlook on life if they haven't developed from that body-orientated kind of mindset, if you like. And you see people with eating disorders and drug problems and so forth, if they haven't developed that aspect of their lives. So it's very, very important in what is my lifestyle coaching channel to actually address these issues of spirituality as well. I mean, on a personal level, I've never been religious. Religion isn't for me, that's for sure. I don't like the controlling and the historical political aspects of religion. And so what I've tended to do with my journey is I've focused more on going direct to the spiritual aspect of things. And two people who have had a great influence on me are Rupert Spira and Eckhart Tolle. I've mentioned them both previously in videos that I've made, but they're very, very interesting characters if you're looking to kind of take a foothold into spirituality, to get a start, if you like, where you can start to develop your own ideas. So Rupert Spira, say for instance, is a great advocate of the concept of non-duality, which is basically the idea that, you know, we are all one consciousness, that this illusion that we have, that we are separate entities moving around the planet, with everybody else being a separate entity with their own governance and their own individuality and nothing much else. He kind of kicks that whole concept out of the window. In a nutshell, his perspective is, and it's very difficult for me to do it justice, I would recommend listening to Rupert online on his YouTube channels, because he can explain it way better than I can. But his concept is that basically we are all one consciousness, expressing ourselves as a focused point of attention in the universe. But fundamentally at our core, we are all the same. We're just different expressions of the same thing, i.e. consciousness. So the idea is that basically we are one. You know, Bob Marley was right all along. One love, one consciousness. And it's actually very reassuring, because what it does is it brings us all together. It makes us realise, when we understand the concept of non-duality, that basically we are all connected by this one consciousness, and that the concept of division is an illusion. And especially in the world that we live in now, you know, there's a lot of divisiveness, whether it be for race, religion, you know, other aspects of life as well, which are causing division at the moment. And to have that understanding from a spiritual perspective, that is not actually the reality, is very comforting. And it also gives us a path out of things that have happened historically. To understand that concept of non-duality is to understand that we're all one. And it is the old saying, the old teaching, you know, that when you hurt somebody else, you're actually hurting yourself. And I think this is something that's very, very interesting to take on board. And as I would say, I would recommend the teachings of Rupert Spira. He's kind of like Eckhart Tolle, who is another one of my mentors. But Rupert takes it down to a much more, he tries to explain the concept more, so that people actually understand the reasoning behind taking certain actions. Eckhart Tolle is absolutely fantastic as well. His beliefs are pretty much along the same lines as Rupert Spira, but in his teachings he doesn't go quite as deep in trying to explain everything. He more or less kind of just gives you the basics for living a more spiritual life. So Rupert Spira and Eckhart Tolle, guys, they can explain these things far better than I can. I think it's very important when you start to take the spiritual journey as well, is to not fall into the trap of starting to make a religion out of spirituality, if you like, to start to create your own religion from somebody else's teachings, and then start to defend those teachings as if it was a religion. Because that's what happens with religion eventually. People start attacking other people on the basis of it, or defending themselves on the basis of religion, which to me is the absolute antithesis of what spirituality is meant to be all about. The idea of spirituality is to actually create a more embracing universe and a more embracing life, if you like, and for us to all be better versions of ourselves and to be better for the people around us. And as soon as you start to defend a point of view, it's very difficult to do that. So I think it's very, very important that when you go into the spiritual realm, is that you do your best not to become a defender of a belief, but to always keep a completely open mind, and even be open to changing a point of view. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a sign of personal development, is when you can put one thing to the side and say, okay, that isn't quite for me now. I'm now going down this path. One of the great benefits I've found from following a spiritual path is that it gives you a much greater connection with intuitive intelligence. And I think this is really, really important, because again, in society, we've become very, very mind orientated. We've become very IQ orientated, and we've become very much academia orientated. And that means that in our lives, the mind has become dominant and we've lost connection with the intuitive heart, the heart chakra, as it's called in the East. But we've become disconnected from that intuitive intelligence, which is actually far greater than mind intelligence will ever be, because intuitive intelligence is the intelligence of the universe and everything that is in it. Whereas mind intelligence is limited by the finite nature of the mind and the brain. So the spirituality takes us back to that connection, if you like, with intuition. And what I found personally anyway is that, especially when you balance out intuition with controlled mind intelligence, it gives you a much greater ability to look at things objectively and to make decisions based on that combination, rather than just using that, which might give you logical conclusions but isn't always the right conclusion, for sure. And we're seeing that all around us today in the world that we're living now, with decisions that people are making based on this rather than this. So I think it's very, very important, guys, that we need to develop our intuition. And of course, by developing intuition, that ties in with the body. Because if we start to eat intuitively, if we start to train intuitively, using that greater universal intelligence, we can actually get to our physical goals much quicker as well. So thanks for listening to the video, guys. I hope it's given you maybe a little bit of a taster of my aspect on spirituality anyway. Very, very important to get into, I think. Remember, we're looking for holistic health and fitness here and lifestyle development. And it's not just all about, getting great biceps or a great pair of shoulders or whatever, That's actually very, very superficial. When it comes down to it, as I say, the spiritual aspect is as important, if not more important, than all of that put together. So remember, guys, if you found that the video on what I'm talking about resonates with you in some way, it would be much appreciated if you could just very gently tap onto the subscribe button and maybe hit the notification bell as well if you would like to get more videos that come along. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care now, guys.